Hey everyone, welcome to our webinar. I'm gonna give it a minute for you guys to, join in as many people as possible before we get started. Today we have a very specific thing to talk about, but it touches so many layers of Opendock. So feel free to chime in with questions and comments. We're going to be talking about how better schedules build better insights. And what we're going to be covering is how can you guys make the most of Opendock to really create meaningful insights that's going to help, kind of close the loop on planning, execution, how well and how close I executed to what was on the schedule. How can I get better, and how do I find the points or the bottlenecks where I need to work on? So this is some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about and going a little bit more in detail about uh, the new report. Sounds like I have two mics open. Is that what it?
That's what it says. You sound fine to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jen, is there any chance that you have the webinar maybe open in two different screens? Does this sound okay to you?
yeah, it also sounds good to me. It doesn't sound echoey.
Okay. Let's keep going. If it sounds weird to anyone else on the webinar, please let us know, guys, and then we'll try and figure out what's happening. Alrighty, so let's get started. Oh, okay, perfect. I'm glad, Jen, that's all sorted out. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Julie. I'm the product lead for Opendock. We're going to be talking about how building really good schedules really help us enhance the data and the insights that we get. We'll do a live demo on some of our reporting and new dashboards that we created on Opendock. So I'm really excited for us to have this chat. Without further ado, let's get started. So, going into a quick housekeeping before we dive in. This session is recorded, so you all received the note that this is being recorded. The link is going to be available for you guys with additional resources right after the meeting is done. You have access to all the previous recordings for the webinar as well as this one. Um, Use the chat for questions. Tyler is on the meeting with me and he's going to be helping out answering questions that you guys might have on the chat. Unfortunately, you cannot open the mic and ask them out loud, but we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat for questions. We'll have a little session for a Q&A at the end, but we'll make sure that we address everything that you guys want to talk about specifically. Feedback is always, always welcome. We use the What's New session on the product to bring feedback, ask for features, give us visibility of issues or anything that you guys might be encountering with Opendock or that you think would be interesting for us to bring to the platform. Bring that to your account managers as well. They're always eager to listen and to absorb all the feedback. Right. Okay, what we're going to be covering today. So, why reporting starts with the scheduling. What are the data points that the scheduling captures that's really going to be meaningful or can be meaningful to my reporting afterwards? Low type in game management. What's the correlation between the two? What's my, low types and what has to do with the rivals from carriers? Live demo. We're going to see some of the content, especially the new reporting that we've built live and we can go through like all of them, why you built them and what you guys can get out of them. Every status update is a data point, so we're going to go through the status timeline and really understand what that translates into reporting for us. New warehouse performance dashboard. With the demo, we're going to cover that, and then at the end, a Q&A session. Why reporting starts with the schedule. So basically the schedule is the plan. This is how we usually like to see this, right? The schedule is ideally this is how it's going to work. And we always prep to what's going to happen according to the schedule. So I look today to the schedule for next week so I can prep staff, I can prep the doctors. I know exactly what's coming in and what's going out. So you have to be prepared for what's in the schedule, but we know real life doesn't happen according to plan 100% of the time. So by configuring Opendock the right way and by making good use of Opendock to also map out execution and not just planning, you guys are able to take the two, how did I execute against my plan, and really compare and understand how far away from the plan I am. And maybe I'm far from the plan because I didn't account for some issues that I have operationally in the real life that I did not take into account when I was, creating Opendock. Maybe because your operation is growing and now you need to go back into your settings and look, okay, how do I accommodate for the growth that I've had? How do I accommodate for now, maybe it's a peak season, maybe it's low season. How do I accommodate for that? And how do I reflect Opendock to be able to take that into account and bring better insights to me? Or even there's a doctor that's not performing really well. There's a low type specifically that we're struggling with. There's one specific carrier that's not, so those are the things and the layers that you guys, as much as the more that you use Opendock to not just record what's in the plan, but also record execution, that you guys are going to be able to have visibility of. So looking at the green kind of screen right there, load types configured to match real operation. The more granular, the more detailed you get to the load types, not too granular to the point that you have an immense list of load types that don't really tell you much, but not too general and basic that you can't really understand your operation with the level of granularity that you need. So how to set up the load types the best way possible to get the data that you need to understand performance. Gate management captures precise arrival timestamps automatically. Should we rely on manual status changes every single time? With gate management, I think that we can solve and help with a lot of the flow that right now causes for a lot of dispute if we're not using driver check-in. In progress status, it's an optional status for us, but how can we make the most out of it? And what are the data points that using the in progress status are going to bring to me and bring visibility of? The dwell time broken into waiting times and unloading per dock. And then what does that translate into reporting? What actually happened versus what was on the plan and how you can use that data to defend your operation. All right, going into now, every status update is a data point. So this is the very famous timeline for appointments. So some of you guys like to use the requested status as well, which is an additional layer that you can have. The in progress status is another optional status. Some of you guys like to use it. Some of you guys prefer not to, just to expedite things, reduce manual work. But I'd like to bring visibility into what am I losing by not using in progress status, for example. So schedule is the plan. The appointment, this is when it's scheduled for. If everything goes right, this is the exact amount of time that it's going to take from the moment that, the carrier arrives until the moment that they depart. This is exactly when it's going to happen. So you kind of allocate a new plan. This is the schedule status. Arrived is how close the carrier was in getting there and making things happen according to plan. If they get too early, for example, that might be a great thing for a lot of you guys. But if you don't have capacity, an available doctor, for example, to receive them, and if they arrive too early, things start to get messy because you have too many drivers waiting and you don't have the ability to receive them. Sometimes it's way better because then you can say, hey, okay, I know you're scheduled for an hour from now, but we can receive you right now. This is the doctor that we can receive you in. So there are pros and cons to a driver or carrier arriving early. Really depends on how your operation works, but we always know that arriving late is really, really bad and a red flag, right? So how can we use the arrived status to really translate that? Right now, I think the challenge is if we're not using a gate management solution or a driver check-in solution, your arrival really depends on someone manually updating that status. This is when the carrier has arrived. And the reality is we don't always have visibility of that. So it's a data that's highly disputable. If if we don't have like a specific process to do that internally and a very rigid one. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as well, but having that data be as accurate as possible, and especially having that responsibility sort of like being taken away from a doctor operator, for example, or from a yard manager, and being given into the driver when they arrive to check in and signal and alert the warehouse that they have arrived. This takes away a lot of the friction internally or the wrong data points that you could be creating with updating the arrival times after the event happens, but not seeing a driver that's already on site waiting for an hour, for example, and only now I've seen him and then he handed the paperwork. All of that translates into messy, inaccurate data that you could be solving with the driver check-in, for example. In progress and waiting times. So in progress is an optional status. But the reason that we decided to bring to Opendock is because it covers a very, very important gap. Is that time between carrier arrived and when I actually started loading, unloading, right? And that's the waiting time. That's the time that the driver is on site waiting to be docked or waiting for a next step that will take them to the in progress. And a lot of times, the offender to your operation is the waiting time. It's taking too long between the time that they arrive and we're ready to receive them at the doctor. Other times is the in progress to completed, the actual loading and unloading times that you need to take care of. If you don't have this layer, if you're looking at dwell times from just, arrived to completed, this is how long the driver or the carrier was on site. If you're looking at that through that specific lens only, you have visibility of, yeah, my dwell times are way too big. How do I solve for that? Where do I need to solve it is really important. Do I need to solve for the waiting time that is too long? Do I need to solve for, loading and loading faster for one specific load type at one specific doctor? So that level of granularity is really important. I highly, highly recommend that you guys use the in progress status if you're not using it because it brings so many more data points that are important to your operation. Now, gate management and load types. So I talked about a little bit before, but when we're using a driver check-in solution, we're really removing the human error aspect or even responsibility, added responsibility and manual actions. Uh, they take time. They they kind of demand that a certain process is enforced, right? And it's hard to have a process enforced and executed the same way by everyone that's working on the facility. You're always going to have this one person that prefers to mark them arrived once it's done, and then I go back and update the arrival time. Or I do arrival times at the end of the day, I just go back in and update the correct arrival times according to what was on, what was the paperwork from the window or the check-in clerk. So there are many different processes that facilities and our customers have around updating the arrival time, and they're all kind of focused on trying to remove some of the friction from the manual work. And gate management, I think, came in to do a lot of things. The driver check-in solution, having the driver come in, scan QR code, provide all the information and say, hey, I'm here for this appointment. This is the time that I arrived. It solves for a lot of problems. So the imprecise timing that we talked about, the contested data points. Hey, I've been waiting for 2 hours. Actually, I only saw you an hour ago. So, like, how are you waiting for 2 hours? I haven't seen you come in. Like, all that data, it becomes so easy to be disputed because you don't have the actual precise data point, right? Inconsistent behavior, people work differently, even if the process is the same. Maybe I prefer to do it the moment that I start. Maybe I prefer to update it at the right before I end the loading unloading. That makes a difference, and that changes your data point. The more accurate you get, the better insights and reporting you're gonna have. And of course, the dwell inflation. So if you don't notice when the driver arrived, for example, you may be masking a problem because they were here way earlier. I didn't see it. This is the moment that they were actually able to check in at a window or hand in the paperwork, for example. To them, the that they arrived a long time ago. To us or to the operation, they've only been waiting for a little bit. How do we improve a process that you don't really have full visibility of how much damage is causing, right? So automatic arrival capture. Driver comes in, they signal and alert you that they have arrived. This is the appointment. We update the appointment status to arrived automatically. We bring all the check-in information, including paperwork that they might have. It's a layer of security, but it's a layer of accurate timestamp of carrier arrival. Defensible data for carrier conversation. So you show carriers exactly when they arrived, and not necessarily when the appointment was scheduled for or when we saw that you arrived. There's no dispute. Consistent across all docks. If every arrival gets the same treatment, they all come in through gate management, driver check-in, regardless who's working the floor, you're going to have a very consistent experience and data point. It connects to yard management. So if this is something that's interesting to your operation, having more visibility of how your yard is operating, the combo of gate management with our YMS provides a huge and really, really rich layer of visibility to have a full picture of arrival until departure and how your yard is operating as a whole. Now, load types. How they relate or how they correlate with better metrics and building rich data points within Opendock. So I think that the breakdown here is kind of like the base rules that I have for making it or building the load types in a way that they're going to tell me something afterwards. A lot of times we view the load types as how can I make them as easy as possible for my operation to understand what's coming and going, and for the carriers to select the right option when they're scheduling an appointment. But there's an added layer to how we build load types that is what is the story that this is going to tell me afterwards, and how is it that I want to make sure that I am tracking performance within my operation. So defining the load type to reality, creating the load types that actually match how you operate and run, identifying the load types and creating the right breakdown that's going to tell you, okay, this guy right here operates slightly different than this guy right here. So I need to make sure that I create separate load types for them so that I can track them individually. This is kind of like the base rule for that. So inbound LTL, outbound FTL, for example, returns, live loads specifically, drop and hook, like separating that, making good use of the load type attributes, which is the information that we track when we're creating a load type. Is it a live or is it a drop? Is it an inbound or is it an outbound? Like all that information is really important to then be able to track down exactly what's happening in an operation. Like I caught one customer the other day, like they had for whatever reason they had like all of their appointments sort of configured as inbound, both inbound and outbound. So when we create the metrics for it, they were relying solely on the label or the name of the load type to be able to identify what's an inbound and outbound. That creates messy data that doesn't really help you understand how you're operating. So make good use of the attributes and use the names and the labels of the load types to make it really clear to the scheduler or to your operation what that is, but make use of the attributes of the load types to actually have that layer of reporting really solid. Unlock dock level comparison. So when we're looking into the data that we build on the insights and the dashboards that we're building, we are looking to always have dock level, load type level visibility of how you're operating. So comparing live versus drop and hook, comparing LTL, FTL, but also comparing like live load for this one specific load type, raw materials, let's give it an example, versus how am I operating for a very similar load, but it's allocated at a different dock door. That should tell you that if similar loads operating at a different dock door, or even the same load type operating at different dock doors, if they have different, dwell times, if they have different processing times, which is loading and unloading times, for example, that should tell you that, okay, maybe this is something that I need to tackle at the dock level. If you see your load type, same load type, different docks operating pretty much the same, then you understand that. So you kind of have the different layers, and when you combine that by looking at your reporting, you can really narrow down where the problems and the bottlenecks are. Power carrier scorecards. So the carrier insights And being able to build that segmenting that data by load type as well. There's a lot on the plans for us in terms of reporting to really enhance reporting capability. One of them is completely revamping the carrier insights to provide an additional layer of visibility on how your carriers are performing. But you can build that data yourself also by just pulling in that data from the carrier reports or from the custom reports. Find hidden bottlenecks, volume, capacity, pinpointing which load types are, overloading specific docks, for example, which load types are taking longer or maybe are way faster than they should be according to the schedule. If they're going too fast, why am I allocating 2 hours for something that usually takes me an hour, 30 minutes to load and unload? Why am I, allowing for so many appointments to be created for this specific like load type on this specific dock? Should I share this with another dock, for example, and kind of dilute my capacity a little bit so that I can prep for that and not overload one single dock? Those are all conversations that you can have internally once you start building your schedule in a way that's easy to reflect on reporting. Now, from the schedule to the insights. So, uh, doc schedule and the load types, building them correctly, that's going to have the plan. Arrival in progress using gate management. That's going to end status update. So this is the two buckets right here. Updating the status correctly and really having the correct timestamps for what's happening after the schedule. This is going to give you the operational reality layer, the comparison between what was on the schedule and what's actually happening. And the delta between that, like what was planned, what's on the schedule, and what I actually executed, this is what you see on the reporting and insights. And for that, we have the All Insights tab, the Carrier Insights tab, the Warehouse Insights tab, and the General Reporting where you can build your own. And going into the warehouse performance dashboard, we built three mainly new reports to provide you visibility, really focusing a lot more on visibility of how my warehouses are performing against each other. Because the dock level, the load type level, all those data points are already there, but we knew that we were missing a higher level visibility of how a warehouse is operating in general. How can I compare and understand if maybe like this is the rule that I'm setting and there's one outlier that I need to pay attention to a little bit more. So when we look at the warehouse overview, you can see now on time, late, no shows, cancellation. You can see a detailed breakdown of average dwell time, waiting times, and that's by using the in progress status, unloading and loading time per location. And you kind of can compare how your warehouses are performing against each other. Time metrics. You also have average dwell time, waiting, unloading time per warehouse, but you go like a level deeper. Your P90, which is a data point that we bring, is where the actual pain lives. So if your P90 dwell, for example, is 4 hours, this is a good example that I wanted to bring, and your P50 is 45 minutes, then you understand that there's an outlier there that you need to investigate. So just the overall averages, they're not going to tell you much, but you need to go a layer deep and understand, okay, where are the outliers? Where am I going off my general rule of behavior and how can I act on top of that? And then understanding volume, understanding dock utilization, understanding how your warehouses are so disparate that you need to analyze them individually with a different rule and or with a different in a different way. If you have a warehouse, for example, that's high volume and really busy during the week, for example, closed during the weekends, it's completely different to how you're going to analyze and go really deep into detail from a warehouse. There's a lower volume, for example, might be open 24/7. So understanding how different they're operating is also going to help you understand how exactly you can analyze the data. Now, trustworthy Opendock data, signs to watch out for. So we've built some red flags pretty much that could tell you that maybe you need to invest a little bit more in building good data points within Opendock. when dwell times are impossibly short, for example. What does that mean? Are you running through the statuses and not really marking them according to how, like, exactly how long each step of the execution is taking? So marking arrived consistently, using gate management for automatic capture could help solve for that. All load types are showing too general or just as a single type. You don't have enough granular visibility of how your actual load types are operating. Having it too granular too, it's also an issue because when you go and pull the reporting and you don't understand all that data because you have 2,000 different load types, they're slightly different from one another, but not really. Like that's not a good way to build data that's going to tell you insightful information. Carrier disputes or dwell records, manual arrival logs, they cannot be proven. So having a driver check-in is really helpful to kind of eliminate this risk layer. Every appointment shows the same status pattern. That should tell you that something is wrong. Nothing up, like if you have different operations, inbound, outbound, different types of load, for example, different doctor performance, it's impossible that all your load types are operating pretty much the same way. So you have to understand what steps you're missing, and maybe it's the in progress status, for example, that's not giving you visibility of how long loading and unloading is actually taken, and you're only looking at dwell times, and that's generalizing a little bit too much. High dwell time variance with no explanation. Now that's the other side of the spectrum, right? If you have a really, really high dwell time, what happened? Did we not update the status of the appointment correctly? Like I have arrived, but I never really completed the appointment for the longest time. So then you're gonna have outliers, and you're not gonna have pretty sane data to look at. Um, the reports are there, but they feel unreliable. I feel like they're not exactly reflecting how I'm operating. So, of course, one side of it is what is the Opendock team doing? How are they building this data? And we try and provide as much visibility as possible to how we're building all the data points that we are. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. But another point of attention is maybe if they feel unreliable, is it the process? Are we not updating things correctly? And this is the reason why the reports kind of feel a little bit off from how we're actually operating. Live demo. So I know that I talked a lot and we don't have a whole lot of time. So I'm just really going to focus on the warehouse insights and the new tabs that we have added. So like I commented, like couple changes that we have here on the warehouse insights. The main tab is now the warehouse overview, and it gives me a view of all my different warehouses, number of appointments, and I can always play around with the date range. I can filter to a single warehouse if I need to have this view to a single warehouse. I can also play around to what I consider to be on time. If I want to give a 15-minute grace period, for example, we're going to recalculate the data to match that. But you're gonna have visibility of your on time, your late, your cancellation, your no-shows, your reschedules across all your different warehouses. You can play around with the data in here as well and see how warehouses are performing, which warehouse is more like it has a higher rate of lateness, which one is performing really well on time, cancellations, no shows, same thing. The second tab is the scheduled versus idle time. This is a very well-known report by most of our customers. The goal here is to always understand what's my availability versus what will actually happen in that period of time. So mind you guys, this is all red on my screen because I'm using a demo account. But what we want to do is make sure that we're utilizing our capacity as much as possible. Because otherwise we have too much availability and maybe idle, teams sitting idle, doctors are open for no reason, or, are available and ready but not being fully used. Should I, reduce the amount of doctors that I have available or doc schedules and concentrate volume on less warehouses so that I can use the staff, really prep, and kind of like have all the appointments one after the other we have without too much idle time. So those are the conversations that you can start having by looking at this one specific report. Then we have the load type analysis, node 1 as well, but it gives you visibility into the load type level. And this is, so let me switch to the load type name. Visibility on the load type level of appointments, dwell time, waiting time. So this is the extra data point that you get by using the in progress status. You start to break down dwell time. How much of my dwell time is waiting time? How much of my dwell time is actually loading, unloading times? And if I'm taking too long to load and load, but waiting time is too short, then you know exactly where you need to tackle, right? What is the issue? If waiting times are too long, but my team is really good at loading and unloading times, it's just between carrier arrived and they're docked. What's happening in there? What's taking so long for the driver to be ready to be at the door, or for the driver to be docked and loading and unloading to get started? Then we have the status update analysis. This should give you a view into, is my operation moving across all the different status correctly? And then we have the time metrics with that additional layer that I talked about and that I showed you guys before. It gives you even more insight across how you're operating in terms of times and then volume as well. I'm gonna stop right here. Be mindful of you guys' time. I know this was